All this used to be rice fields. Just beyond that tree line, you beginning to where the saltwater marsh, all of this fresh water, all this water here. Why did they put sandbags there? But all this fresh water, there's several of these things that lead down to the ocean, and include some rather large canals. All this, right now there's about, I don't know, 1 foot of water in these fields. When the rain starts falling, the water dries out, the rice is going to be harvested, which is at the end of the rainy season, probably a month and a half or so. But this is the part of the world that you don't see in my videos most time. The ocean is that direction. And there are sheep. Oh no, goats. It does look like sheep and cows. These are the African people who inhabited the Philippines. Hello. That's the waterman. Those are the foundation that the Philippines was built, the human foundation that the Philippines was built on. Today, the Philippines see themselves as Europeans, as American actually. And, they're willing to go up against China. They're willing to go up against China. When I say the Philippines, not the people particularly, but the government, the leadership, the people who have the money. Same thing with the people in South America and everywhere else. Japan, Taiwan, they have benefited from it. The wealthy, they have benefited from that cooperation. And they go along with it. In the meantime now, these people who are called, they call them Aita here. The short, you'll see them are short, dark-skinned people. Either dark-skinned or black. And they don't grow to, it's about 4'10", 4'11", unless they're mixed. Never above 5 feet tall. Anyway, back to our subject we revealed in the last video. What we are having now is America. One of the events that you saw happening during the last decade is the recognition that China will eventually take over the economic leadership and the military leadership. China didn't, supposedly, from what I am reading and heard, didn't want a war like America did in Europe to take over from the America. They estimated that America would be losing its grip on the world somewhere around 2060. And they were patiently waiting for that. But then America did this, what Obama called the pivot to the east, and engaged China head on. And now, the last one to act was Biden, who had to continue that, get Trump out, because Trump was really just trying to control things in that slow demise. But America didn't want to do that. America wanted, what they call the neocons want to say, yeah, we're not going to accept that we are going to lose control of the planet. We can destroy the Chinese model if we control everything that they need for their economic growth. So they went after Russia, like I said in the last video, to take the resources that Russia had. But that was the error that they made. Instead of giving, they took, after 1991, they moved into Russia and tried to take over the resources. And then they built up NATO, so that NATO, or they were trying to build up NATO so that NATO would be the army that suppresses Russia in case the Russians rebelled. But a funny thing called Vladimir Putin came to power, and he was kind of low-key building the Russian military. The economy too, but he was building the Russian military. He let the Americans come in and drill the oil, and slowly he began to push back and say, look, we know what you're doing, I know what you're doing, and you can't allow that. He started talking to the Chinese. He made deal with Chinese. The problems that they had with China that caused wars, like the land in the Far East, there was a dispute with land with China. Vladimir Putin said, hey, let's create a city right here, and we trade across this border on this city. Chinese can come over, own this and own that. It worked out. So the Chinese said, hey, this man is serious, let's work with him. America, in their error, in their thinking, thought that they were strong enough. Them and the EU and NATO was strong enough to control China and Russia. But instead of dividing the two, as Kissinger had tried to do, Kissinger and Nixon in '71, actually they did. They had Russia on their side, but they had Russia neutral. The Soviet Union, they had not what called Russia, what called the Soviet Union fighting China, and then they and the Chinese became friends, or at least they thought that way, and they moved everything to China because of that slave labor. But the Chinese had a different plan. They were going to build China on their terms, not on the U.S. terms, and let the U.S. control China. Anyway, what we have today is a situation where China is the economic powerhouse. Russia is a military powerhouse. The Russians now said, hey, put forward the idea of BRICS. And they sat down and decided who was going to come in, who is the most important to bring this platform on. They got together with India, Brazil, and started building BRICS. South Africa came in later. Now, the BRICS started out giving loans to people who were getting tagged by the IMF and World Bank, strangled. And then after 2008, they decided, you know what, the system is going to fail. We got to speed up the system. SCO is BRICS' answer to NATO. As they can see it coming. Today, after 2008 and the crash that the Chinese saved the American system from, the Chinese decided, you know what, we're going to go in hard on building our own system. And that's what they began to do, seriously. So now America started to speed up what they were doing in Russia, bringing all the nations into NATO and the EU, because they going to need that manpower if they're going to fight Russia and China. So they brought all these other European nations that were in the Soviet Union into NATO and started training their armies and adding their economies to Europe. In the meantime, the Germans now, every time one of these nations joined the EU, the Germans will strip them of their most valuable assets. So Germany became the lead player in Europe as the head of the economy of the EU, with France and England tagging along. As we see here the other day when the war between Russia and NATO started, the US stripped Germany. They didn't have to go after Italy and France and all those. They came in and stripped Germany of all of its assets. A few of German corporations made a quick pivot to China because they are already built up a lot of business in China. But those who didn't, like the Dutch, and they're one main corporation, oh shoot, missing, that builds computers, that builds chips, that manufactures chips, computer chips. They were ahead of everybody else, and the Chinese were going along with them. They thought that they were dependable. But America now is in a position where it's telling the Dutch, you will do this. And they're bringing like TSMC. And they're forcing Japan, Taiwan, Korea to strip their country now of anything that the Chinese can use. Instead of sending it to China, they want built in America. So now the world economy now is being taken where anything that's owned that's of value is being relocated from Europe to America, from Japan to America, from Korea to America. And you have China as the biggest manufacturer on the planet, Russia with its army that can defend against NATO and the US, have joined together, who are planning everything in the world. And they're not rushing, they're doing it very slowly, which is frustrating to the US, because you see what they did with Iran and Saudi Arabia. Wow, the clouds are moving fast today. See what they did with Iran and Saudi Arabia, and what they did the other day. They got Hamas and the other part of the Palestinian Authority together. Now, if the two of them are together, the world always said they wanted a two-state solution in Israel. That's going to happen. But Israel is not agreeing to that. And the neocons created by Israel not agreeing to that. So they want a war. They want a destructive war in the Middle East. They think that if they destroy the Middle East, that this won't happen. And you hear the word Zionist used a lot lately. Zionism began a long time ago. You know, we are the chosen of God to rule the whole planet. Is thousands of years old. But now you got Israel, who has their atomic bombs, thinking that they can threaten everybody and bring them to heel. And with the money and the control of the US Congress, they attempted to do that. So now America is bringing 4 aircraft carriers into the Middle East. So you see, there's an attempt to fulfill what they wrote into the book. It wasn't something that God planned, it was their plan. But now everybody is seeing the truth about the so-called chosen. And in the back of that, people are realizing that the real Israelites were black-skinned people. And the information is coming out from everywhere. If you watched a few years ago what happened to Kyrie Irving, the people now who are standing up and say, I'm a Hebrew, and there's no pushback, there's no attack. The attack dog is busy trying to fight off what he sees inevitable. The Chinese and the Russians are behind this whole thing. The Indians too, but the Indians are hedging their bets because they think that they can supplant China in the situation now as leader. But that ain't gonna happen. If I started talking about Africa and how Africa should change its ways. Africa changed within, well, they started changing. The youth are now standing up. So it's going to put India at a disadvantage because the African is laying low. You got Africans all over the world who know the technology, help create the technology, the machinery and everything that America and Britain use in their economy. If they come back home and started building Africa, the people from America, the black skinned people in America, start doing trading with Africa. Start coming to Africa like and working with the Africans. The Indians are going to be out of the whole matter, period. This has happened before. India has always been the second man, even though they'll make it appear as they were the first man. And I'm not saying the second man is a weak man, because you have, for a time, Chinese were a second man, and they weren't weak. So the situation we have now is where the BRICS are controlling the narrative, stepping into positions that America kept in turmoil before, bringing sense of responsibility, bringing logic, saying, hey, if you work together, instead of nobody can get between the two of you. Stop fighting each other and work together. You may not agree on everything, but if you work together, you'll see that you agree on most things. And that's what's happening. And there's a war that's going to start about that. Now, if the Russians come up and the Russians stood up the other day and kept Israel from doing something really stupid. But if the Russians, because Israel would have wiped off the map. Serious. Anybody who dropped one of those things automatically is going to get hit. So, but anyway, they're now in a position where they are slowly bringing the world outside of Europe, with the Japanese, Australians, and Koreans left out of the situation for the time being. They're bringing all those people together. We go forward, we'll see what happens. Peace. We'll continue this in another video.